Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this wonderful afternoon, especially on a holiday. We understand that you are in the weekend spirit and in the weekend mood. But again, because this topic is of interest to so many of us, we are glad that you found the time to join this session. Today's session will be on the very, very famous Data Protection Bill of 2019. This data protection bill has been in the news for a very long time now. Since, in fact, 2017, there have been talks on having a bill like this. There was a judgment where the right to privacy was recognized for the people of India as a fundamental right. And today, where we're sitting, we are going to be discussing the applicability of this bill and how startups can be better prepared for all the compliances that are covered under the bill. Because if news sources are to be believed, then this data protection bill of 2019, which is in fact currently being reviewed by the parliament, is going to be notified very, very, very soon. And once it does, this session from today and the take backs that you will have are definitely going to help you keep your businesses on track. And if you are a student, then definitely this will give you an edge over all your other peers in understanding what the bill has to say. um, all of this will be possible because of Madam Sugata Chaudhary joining us today. Ma'am will be taking the session. Ma'am, thank you so much again for taking this session. We are very, very thankful to you, and we are very glad that you were able to find the time to be taking this session and educating our audience on this hot topic. To give you a little bit brief about Madam Sugita, ma'am graduated from the famous GLC of Bombay in 2014 with a first class law degree. After that, ma'am has been practicing in various forums. Ma'am is in fact a registered solicitor in the Bombay High Court. Ma'am has over 6 years of practice, both in the courts as well as in various law firms, which include ELP, which is the Economic Law Practice, and Link Legal India Law Services. Currently, ma'am is the founder of Longitude. Longitude is a boutique law firm which provides cutting edge legal services to startups both in India and abroad. So Longitude provides comprehensive and customized legal solutions to new businesses, MSMEs, technology-based, and e-commerce startups. The whole business model of Longitude is that from the incorporation and operations of all their clients, which are primarily startups and MSMEs, as I just said, up to their investments, growth, various strategies, and consumer litigations also. Longitude is the one-stop shop for all things legal for any startup and MSME. Longitude has your business covered with a 360-degree legal protection model. Ma'am is also available for advisory VCs on Sundays. Once again, thank you so much for joining the session today, ma'am. Before we begin, just a couple of pointers for all our audiences who've joined in today. We have a couple of very interesting goodies for you. Top three questions will be given goodie bags by ma'am, courtesy again Longitude. And this is primarily for law students. The top interactor from today's session is going to be getting an internship with Longitude in Mumbai. Ma'am has kindly agreed to provide our viewers with this exclusive opportunity. And of course, we have certificates of participation for everybody. For those who are joining us not on Zoom and on live stream, kindly put down all your questions on the comment box and we'll try and get as many of them as covered. For those of you who have registered for this webinar beforehand and are currently present in the Zoom session, you can kindly put down all your questions in the chat box. Ma'am will be entertaining all of these questions towards the end of the webinar. And if possible, we'll also try and get you to switch on your video and your mic so that you can interact one-on-one with ma'am and have your questions answered by ma'am personally. Thank you so much for this. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Rishwan, for that wonderful introduction. And thanks for organizing this and being so cooperative. Hello and welcome, all of you. Thank you so much for taking out the time to come and attend this session. Like Rishwan said, this is a very important legal topic which is catching a lot of steam now, especially when it comes to online businesses and technology based companies and startups. So, without much delay, I'm just going to be sharing my screen with you, which contains a presentation on this topic. So just give me a moment. Is the screen visible to everybody?
Yes,
Reshma?
ma'am. Yes, now it is.
Okay. Okay. So today's topic is applicability and compliances, which are like prospective compliances which you can undertake under the personal data protection bill, which is currently pending in the parliament. It is likely to become law very soon, but it is helpful for companies to know about this law in advance so that they can adapt and implement certain compliances and certain practices within the company from the starting stage, so that it doesn't become a chaos when it actually comes into effect. So this presentation, or rather the session, is focused on basically giving you an overview of the applicability of the bill. How is it going to affect you, and what are the basic compliances that you, as a business, or if you're a lawyer or law student, then what should you be advising your client to do or to comply with, to be in compliance with the bill. So just to give you a brief background, where it all started. So, really speaking, data protection laws find their root really in the fundamental right to privacy, what we call. So, it of course started with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where the right to privacy was given primacy, and it all actually started to develop in the European Union. And in fact, the first, if we speak about modern data protection laws, then in 1970s and the 1980s, more specifically Sweden and Germany were the first countries to come up with a modern data protection law, which speaks more about data protection in terms of what we have, in terms of the technology, in terms of how it is evolving in the electronic space, and in terms of what it really holds, in terms of the security practices that need to be implemented. All these things which are more new and more, it more relates to the modern world. That is something that we first saw in Sweden and Germany in the 1970s. After which, in 1995, there was an EU data protection directive, which sort of streamlined all the data protection laws, and it made it, it got it aligned with the laws in different European countries. So this data protection directive was more or less the base for the GDPR, which came in 25th May 2018. And like we all know about GDPR has, um, it is by far the most, it's the most comprehensive legislation ever made in the world on data protection laws. After the GDPR, if we speak about the Indian context, so in the Indian context, like even Rishwan mentioned in the beginning, the KS Puttaswamy judgment was what really turned tables around for data protection and data privacy. It is a judgment which actually made data, right to privacy, the fundamental right under the Constitution of India. Until then, it fell into Article 21, where it spoke about personal liberty, etc. But it was not given a recognition as a right of, as a fundamental right, which was first time when it came in the Puttaswamy judgment. So after the Puttaswamy judgment, the government then legislated, I mean, it then constituted this committee of experts on data protection, which was led by Justice Sri Krishna. We also call it the Sri Krishna committee, which was basically, it was a committee which came up with a lot of recommendations which the law on data protection should have. So the report came only in July 2018, which had a number of recommendations. It had a number of policies which should be adopted by the government in order to enact a proper data protection act. On on the basis of these recommendations of the report, we finally have what we now call the Personal Data Protection Bill, which the first bill was drafted in 2018. After that, it again went into it underwent some amendments in 2019, post which it is still pending in the parliament. The Joint Parliamentary Committee is actually looking after the is actually looking into the bill. I'm sorry, is looking into the bill and is scrutinizing all the provisions. In fact, recently there was a report in the Livement which said that the Joint Parliamentary Committee has remarked that the bill might undergo some major changes in terms of the scope of its applicability. So, as in now, the bill, it covers personal data, sensitive personal data, and critical data. But it is proposed by the JPC that the bill should now apply to a larger set of data. So the scope is only going to be widened, and it will be interesting to see how this pans out. In most likelihood, the bill will go through another amendment, and this is just in my opinion. It might go through another amendment, which might delay the enactment of it, but it's nonetheless still catching a lot of it's being acted upon very fast because of the changing environment of businesses nowadays, since all the businesses are going online, and there has been an increase in e-commerce, especially due to the COVID pandemic. Everything is going online. So, considering the need of, the urgency of this law to come in, the government is acting very fast. However, I feel it's still going to take some time because the bill is likely to undergo a major overhaul. And that is what at least the news reports say. Now, we don't know how long it will take, frankly. So, So this was about the brief background of the bill. Uh, Now to understand, now since this is already, it's just a bill yet, we need to also, before we delve into the applicability of bill, let's understand what is the current regulatory framework on data security and data privacy in India currently, because this is the law which actually applies to India as of now. This is the law which is applicable to uh, all sorts of data processing currently. So the current framework of law is such that it's basically governed by the Information Technology Act, which is also the but this is only relates to data which is processed by electronic means, or it is online. Manual data processing is not covered right now under any law in India. So this is something that's very important because right now the current framework, if you have a business which is going online, or if you even are a small business which is processing data but through a computer resource or a computer or an electronic device, only that sort of data is covered under the current framework. Now the new bill has also included manual data, and that is a major change which is coming up. But currently, there is no regulation for manual processing. Now, now in the Information Technology Act, we largely have this section 43A, which really deals with the compensation. So, if there is any, if the organization has shown any negligence in maintaining security practices, in handling the personal data or sensitive personal data, then in such a cases, a complaint can be made to the authority, and it will make the data processor or the data fiduciary. I mean, in this case, it's not data fiduciary. I'm sorry, but in this case, the person who's processing the data will be liable to make good compensation to the person whose data is collected. So that was about Information Technology Act. But the major and the most important rules which are prescribed under the Information Technology Act is what we call the SPDI rules, which is Information Technology Reasonable Securities Practice and Procedures and Sensitive Personal Data or Information Rules 2011. This is a very basic structure. It's like a very basic rule structure which is made under the IT Act in order to regulate data processing by way of online means. Now, the data, now it's important to know that the data here is only of personal nature. That means any data which is anything which is related to a non-personal which is a non-personal data, which that means it could be like if you are an incorporated company, or if you are an entity which is incorporated, a firm, a proprietorship, that any data relating to that is or to the company is not personal data. Personal data is something which is related to a natural person. It could be, that means a human being like you and me. So any data which is personal in nature and which can make a person, which can identify a person, that is personal data. So that is the data which is covered currently under the SPDI rules and the Information Technology Act, of course. So also, it is important to understand that this does not include any sensitive personal data of a foreign citizen. So, if you are an Indian body corporate, I'm sorry. Before this, it's important to also note that the data of that you have to be, that these rules apply only to body corporates. That means it applies only to incorporated entities, and it also could be a sole proprietorship, but it has to be, but it does not apply to individuals. At the same time, this rules also does not, so if you are an incorporated entity, only then these rules will apply to you, otherwise they won't apply to you. Secondly, you also, if you're an incorporated entity, the data that you're processing should be of a personal nature and it should be of an Indian citizen. So if you are processing data, if your company or the firm or the body corporate is processing data of a foreign citizen, these rules will not apply. So that is the applicability of the current SPDI rules. What we call is what is currently applying to Indian body corporates. Uh, what does it include? What does sensitive personal data include? So if you look at your screen, these are all the things which are included in a sensitive in the definition of sensitive personal data currently. So it could be password, financial information, bank accounts, bank account details, physical, physiological factors, mental health. So all these things which you see on your screen here are the things which are these kinds of data actually are included in sensitive personal data under the current regulations. And in terms of compliances, of course, currently, if you're a body corporate who is processing personal sensitive personal data of a personal nature, and that too relating to an Indian citizen, then you are required to make certain compliances under the SPDI rules, which includes a privacy policy. You need to have a privacy policy in place which details about how you have secured the data, how you have managed to keep the data that you've collected to be private and to be secure where you're storing it. So your privacy policy, you have informed consent. So before you collect the data, you have to take the consent of the person from whom you're collecting the data, and it has to be an informed consent, as in you have to inform the person about what is the purpose for which you are collecting the data, what is the how are you going to store it, how are you going to secure it, what processes have you put in place in order to keep that data secure and to keep it encrypted or keep it password protected to avoid any breach of data. So all these things you have to inform your data subject, or the person from whom you are collecting the data. You have to inform all these things when you're taking the consent. So that is the second compliance. Then you also have a grievance officer under the current rules, which means you have to appoint, if you're a business, you have to appoint a grievance officer as a one point contact in your organization, who can address any grievances which are raised by your customers, your clients, etc. So that is, of course, a very important compliance that you have to make. The next thing is your transfer only with consent. So if there is any, if your business requires you to transfer that data to any third party, so it could be anybody who is for whom, I mean, the third party could be anybody who will require that data for the purposes of anything that they might be performing any function for you on that data. So any transfer to any third party again has to be with an explicit consent of your data subject. That means the person from whom you're taking the data. And the fifth is also reasonable security practices and procedures. So again, there are certain practices and procedures which are put in place, and the current rules also, which also require you to you're required to comply with all these security practices in order to secure the data. So these are largely, or like a very basic overview. Of course, there can be, this can go more into detail and in depth, but the current topic, since we are also running on a limited time, these are the basic requirements that are this is the basic overview of the current framework which is there in India. So moving on to the bill. Now, to understand the applicability of the PDP bill, it is important to first understand what are the kinds of data that are covered by the bill. So, like you can see on your screen, there are basically four types of data which are covered in this bill. So, data as a whole. Now, data as a whole has been given a very wide definition under the bill, and if you see, it has included processing by humans or by automated means. So data could be any data. It is not like the current regime where it only refers to the data which is stored or it is processed electronically. The PDP bill even covers manual data. Of course, there are certain exemptions, etc., which are there in the bill, but then again, those are conditional to certain, they are conditional to certain requirements being there. But like for domestic use, etc., if you're using data, or you're processing data manually for domestic use or for some personal use, then that data will not really be covered under the definition of data. I mean, it won't be covered under the bill. So that we'll see once we go to the applicability of the bill. um, Yeah, that we'll see once we go to the applicability of the bill. But these are the kinds of so first, it is important to understand what are the kinds of data which are covered by the bill largely. So there are four kinds. There's personal data, then there's sensitive personal data, like we also discussed for the SPDI rules. It means any data about or relating to a natural person who's directly or indirectly identifiable. So the word identifiable here is very important, because this really qualifies personal data. So for example, anything that is uh, personal data will be anything which creates an identity of the person. So if you could be a natural, for example, Rishwin is a natural person. Now, just his name, if I just take his name and his age, will that become personal data? No, because there might be many other Rishwin Rishwan who with the same age who might be there in the country. So it's not necessary that identifies this Rishwan. Similarly, so you need to, so to qualify as personal data, you have to collect it will imply data which actually leads to you identifying a certain person. So if you take the name, the age, the address, the gender of the person, then you can identify the person. So that also qualifies as personal data. So that is personal data, which is largely the kind of data which is, which will reflect everywhere in the bill. So personal data, you need to, so that's why it's very important to understand what is personal data really. So this is what is personal data. Then comes sensitive personal data, which is actually a superset of personal data. Like it's a kind of personal data, but with additional requirements. So, like you see on your screen, all these things will, if you collect all these things, they will qualify under sensitive personal data. So, if you collect the name and address and maybe gender of a person, that is not sensitive personal data. But along with these, along with these, if you are also taking the financial data, or if you're also collecting genetic data of a person, or if you're also collecting, say, the caste or the biometric data, or anything, or even official identifier. For example, what is an official identifier? It is your designation, or it is something that will give you, will identify your official designation. For example, if I am the founder at Longitude, that is my official identifier. So all these things, which are mentioned on the screen, your financial data, health data, official identifier, sex life, sexual orientation, biometric data, genetic data, transgender status, intersex status, caste, tribe, religious or political beliefs, something as uh, something as insignificant as, or maybe, I mean, it's not, but political beliefs or affiliation is something that one may not think that this might be sensitive personal data, but it does count as sensitive personal data. So all these things must be kept in mind, and insofar, how much ever possible, companies must try and minimize taking sensitive personal data, because sensitive personal data is naturally, by the name sensitive, it is also, it also leads to a lot of additional compliances to be made as compared to personal data. So and it also leads to like more stricter, a more stricter lens by the government. The government is likely to look at companies who collect sensitive personal data a little more strictly, and we don't want the risk to, the risk of running any investigations, etc., by the government. So it is advised to minimize collecting sensitive personal data. And of course, then there is critical personal data. And so this critical personal data is something that is going to be defined by rules. But then this is likely to be something which is, which is critical to the safety or security of the country, or something which is a threat to the sovereignty of the country, or something which is extremely like government secrets, or something which is extremely critical. So this has not been defined as of now. I mean, this is something that's going to be prescribed by the rules, which is going to come later. But yeah, so largely these are the four or five, the categories of data which are covered by the PDP bill. Now, what do you do to this data to make the bill apply to you? Now, will just collecting data amount to processing? Yes, it does. So if you see the definition of processing under the act, sorry, under the bill, it it is a very, very, very wide definition. So processing or profiling, there are two things. These are two things. If you do this with the data, the bill applies to you. So first we understood what are the kinds of data, what are the kinds of data that the bill applies to. Then second is processing. What do you do to the data that the bill applies to you? So that is processing. Like you can see from the definition on your screen, it includes. So it is also a very inclusive. It's an inclusive definition, so it can be widened, right? So yeah, so it includes operations such as collection, recording, organizing, structuring, storage, adaptation, alteration, uh, all these things, combination. Now, in terms of like if anybody is from a tech background, like they would also be able to understand like there are a lot of functions which you can apply to data, which can also qualify as processing. So you need to under, so that is a call which you will have to take in consultation with your technology expert to understand whether this is processing. But in to understand in the legal world and in the legal meaning of the term, basically anything under the sun that you do to the data is processing, and it is likely to be even more like it's likely to be made even more wider. Even collection, just plain collection of the data and storing it is processing. So a lot of people ask me many times that what is it applies to data processing. So what is it that that is this processing? So if we don't process data, it won't apply to us. No, even collection and storage is processing of data. So next is the persons covered by the bill. So largely these are these four category of persons who are covered by the bill. One is the data fiduciaries, which are the similar concept as data controller under the GDPR. But so these are the companies who decide that what is to be done with the data. So if you're a company, you're a startup, and you will decide the purpose for which the data is being applied to, for what data is it, what purpose is it going to be used, how is it going to be applied, that makes you a data fiduciary. So you are the person who controls the data, and the data fiduciary is actually accountable, has the maximum compliances and the maximum accountability and a maximum burden under the bill. So the data fiduciaries are the primary people. I mean, and largely this is the company. These are the companies who process the personal data, and they determine for what purpose is that data going to be used or the data is going to be processed. So that is data fiduciaries. Then you have significant data fiduciaries, which is a concept which is coming under section 21 or clause 26(1) of the bill. And these are likely to be this again has to be notified by the government. I mean, this is going to be prescribed by rules. And who are the data significant data fiduciaries? That is something that is going to be decided by notification of the government. But these are largely going to be very like the name significant says, they're going to be data fiduciaries who process large volumes of data, and who are the ones who are in control of data which is going to be very significant in nature, or that if they commit any breach with the data, or there is any breach in security or anything, there'll be major loss or harm that will be caused to the data principals or the people whose data is collected. So they are very significant data fiduciaries, as in they are the ones who are processing, typically who are processing very large volumes of data. They are also likely to be social media intermediaries. So social media companies, social media intermediaries are going to be primarily notified to be significant data fiduciaries. Next is data processors. Data processors, so sometimes the data fiduciary is not the same entity as the data processors. So sometimes the companies usually outsource their processing of the data to a third party, or to another entity. So so data processors are those entities which merely just process the data on instructions of the data fiduciary, but they do not decide as to what is to be done with the data, or they cannot decide the purpose for the processing of the data. So data processors, if you understand this difference, so data fiduciaries and processors are always bound by a contract, and there'll always be a contract. In fact, even the bill requires the data processors only to work on a contract with data fiduciaries. And usually it's like it's a principal to principal contract, but the difference here is that the data fiduciaries will also be accountable for the breaches made by data processor, because they are the ultimate entity which is accountable, who's accountable to the data principal. They are the ultimate entities who have the control over the data, and they are the ones who are answerable to the data principal. So data processors can be a third category. They also have to make certain compliances, and they also have to be careful with their handling of the data, but they do not decide what is to be done with the data, right? Then comes the data principal. Data principal is the person who simply is the person from whom the data is collected. So it's the same concept as the data subject under the GDPR, and here it's called data principal. Okay, so next is when will the bill apply? Now, section 2 or clause 2 of the bill really goes into the applicability um, of the bill, and it lays down four criteria, actually three criteria, but I've like broken them up. First is when the data is collected, disclosed, shared, otherwise processed within the territory of India. This is regardless of whom. So if you are a data fiduciary, if you are processing data within the territory of India, no matter where you are, no matter what your citizenship is, no matter where you're incorporated, nothing, you're processing data in India within the territory of India, the bill applies to you. Second, when the personal data is processed by the Indian government, Indian company, Indian citizen, or any person. So this also applies to the Indian government. So any so basically, if you're an Indian entity, right? You're an Indian government, you're the Indian company, you're a firm, partnership, you're an LLP, or anything. You're an individual, but you're an Indian. The bill will apply to you. Third is when the personal data is processed by a data fiduciary or data processor outside, but in connection with a business activity in India, or with an activity that involves profiling. So again, now here, if you are not an Indian entity, or if you're a foreign entity, and if you are processing the data if you're doing business in India, I think it's fairly clear that if you're doing business in India and you're collecting data from Indian citizens, then this bill will apply to that foreign entity also. Now, when will it not apply? This is the bill will not apply to anonymized data. Now, what is anonymized data? Anonymized data is nothing but basically it's a function that you apply to the data to irreversibly alter it in such a way that the identity of the natural person is stripped off. So you cannot identify that natural person from when you look at the data. So it there are a lot of softwares, and I think technologies which might um, which can enable anonymization. But basically, the legal aspect is that the bill does not apply to anonymized data. Second is sorry. Second is processing for journalistic purpose. Now there are certain sections which have exempted data processing for any journalistic purposes. It has from certain sections of the act. Um, so that is the second thing. Third is the processing of personal and domestic purpose by natural person. So yes, like I said, if you are manually processing the data and you're doing it for a personal or domestic purpose, like if I am collecting data of the person who's my vegetable vendor, or something which is for a domestic purpose, and the bill will not apply to that. Then there is protecting the security or sovereignty of the state. So when you're collecting data which is such that it is important for that data to be collected for protecting the sovereignty of India as a country, and that kind of data is also exempted from the bill. Next is when the disclosure of the data is necessary to enforce a legal right or obligation. So if you're required under any act or any order or any notification that you have to disclose certain data, and that for that particular reason and for that particular obligation that you have under the legal statute or the legal order, in for that case the bill will not apply to that particular um, that particular disclosure of data. Then comes processing for research, archiving, or statistical purposes. So yeah, so similar to journalistic purpose, but then if there are a lot of research activities, statistical market research, etc., that is done. So in certain cases, these research activities are also exempted. But then again, there are conditions to that, and you have to show certain things that you have not misused any data, etc., etc. So the bill will not apply to those purposes. And lastly, there is manual processing of data by small entities, which may be exempted by government notification. Again, this is something that will be notified and which will be brought into. I mean, there will be rules on this, but the bill in the current form says that the manual processing, only manual. Now, mind you, here this is not talking about electronic processing. There might be some small entities. Small entities might will be defined by notification. Those entities will be exempted from manual processing of data to make life a little easier. For example, for small firms who are into small businesses, and they will be typically firms which are not over a particular turnover or a particular who don't have profits over a particular threshold, and that is something that's going to be notified by the government. So those kind of entities and those manual processing will be exempted by the bill. Next is consent, which is a very important concept under the bill, which is necessary for processing. Now, what is consent? Now, the thumb rule under the bill is that you cannot process data without the consent of the data principal. You will have to understand, you will have to get the consent of the data principal, otherwise, you cannot process or collect personal data. That is a thumb rule. Now, to understand for personal data, like we earlier discussed the difference between personal data and the sensitive personal data. So, for personal data, the consent has to be free in terms of your section 14 of your Contract Act. Um, it has to be informed, it has to be specific. You have to inform the data principal about the purpose for which you're collecting the data. That is very important, because if you don't mention what is the purpose, first of all, you have to, there's another thumb rule that whatever data you're collecting, it has to be for a lawful and a specific purpose. Using that data for anything except that purpose will attract penalties under the and you will also be liable to be questioned by the data principal. The data principal can always ask you for information as to as to how the data is being used, how what is the purpose, and whether it is being used for that purpose also or not. So you have to be accountable for all those things. So that is why it is important for you to know that the personal data, that the consent that is taken, it is informed. You have informed the data principal about everything relating to the data, how you're going to store it, who is going to have access to it, how you're going to process it, what are the technologies that you're going to use to secure the processing of the data. So everything has to be informed, and then you're taking the consent. So that is going to completely it is going to completely protect you from any sort of investigations, inquiries, or penalties under the bill. So uh, for so for personal data, the consent has to be free, it has to be informed, it has to be specific, clear, and it has to be capable of being withdrawn. That's very important, because you have to give the client or the data principal, you have to give when you take the consent, you have to mention and you have to inform the data principal that they have the right to withdraw this consent, and they also have right to review the data that they have given. They have the right to Anyways, the rights of the data principal is a completely separate topic, and I will not delve into it since we are also running on time. But the point being here is that this is an extremely important factor for obtaining consent. So, free, informed, specific, clear, and capable of being withdrawn. Then comes your sensitive personal data. Now, the difference between the consent, you need to take the consent for personal data has to be free and all these, but the consent, you have to take explicit consent for sensitive personal data. So, sensitive personal data cannot, you cannot go on a plain and simple informed consent. There has to be something more than that, and that is explicit consent. So, what is explicit consent? You have to, after informing the purpose or an operation, the processing which is likely to cause significant harm to the data principal. So you are also supposed to mention, and you're also supposed to um, inform the data principal as to what is going to, what are the possible factors which will cause harm to the data principal if that data is if that data leaks. So that makes the data, that makes it qualified under explicit consent, which is required for sensitive personal data. The exceptions, now the exceptions to the consent is really that there are the performance of statutory functions. Of course, like we discussed, even for the exemptions, if there is any statutory functions by law or by notification or any government department, any law, any order of the tribunal, if there's anything that requires you to process the data without consent, then that is an exception. So these are scenarios where you can process the data without consent. So that is of course statutory functions under any law, then compliance with any order of the court, in case of medical emergency, then in cases of disaster relief. Then so these are the instances where there are some reasonable purposes which are mentioned under section 14. And there is consent of employees. Okay, yeah, that is a separate thing. But yeah, these are the 4 or 5 exceptions that are there where you can, which you can see on the screen, where you can process data even without consent of your data principal. Next is about employees. Now, the employees, the consent of the employees is not required for personal data, and this is only for during when they are in the period of employment. So this only applies to personal data. If you're taking the sensitive personal data of your employee, then you will have to take the consent of the employee. But this bill, in terms of taking consent, does not apply to collecting of personal data of employees. So that exception is created in the bill as of now. In the case of in case of processing of data relating to children, the consent of the guardian has to be taken. So that is, I think it's quite obvious. Then comes your compliance checklist for data fiduciaries. Now, these are some of the compliance, these are some very basic things which data fiduciaries must do. So, now just taking a recap, in all these things, we first understood what is the kind of data, what you do to the data, like what is processing, what is profiling, and what you do to the data so that it attracts the provisions of the bill. Then we understood what is the who are the people who are covered under the bill, the data fiduciaries, the data processors, significant data fiduciaries. Then we understood what are the scenarios where when the bill will apply. So if you're an Indian citizen, you're a foreign entity processing in India, or you are a foreign entity who's doing business in India and collecting the data from Indian citizens. In all these scenarios, you have in all these, you put all these things together and you will know if the bill will apply. And then we of course discussed exceptions and exemptions, and categories where the bill which will be exempted from the applicability of the bill. Now we need to understand if this bill applies to you, what is it that you need to do. what is that you need to really do. So first thing is, of course, to set out clearly what is the purpose for which the personal data is collected. So if you're a startup, and if you're if you're just designing policies for the management of your company, or if you have limited staff and you want to, so the first thing, or if you're an online business which is very content heavy, which needs a lot of data to be collected, like for example, we have dating websites and matrimonial websites which require collection of sensitive personal data, where it is quite a lot of data which is very sensitive. So what is it that you need to do? You need to first of all clearly set out the purpose for which the data is collected, and you need to include that in all your policies and your forms which you are going to design later to give it to to mention it in all your emails and your notices that you give to your clients or your customers or your data principals from whom you're going to collect the data, right? So notice, so the under section 7, there's a notice which is required to be given at the time of collection of data, and the notice must contain, now section 7 contains a long list of information which you can easily access, on the text of the bill. So it would be really long to have it enlisted here, so I have not done that. But section 7 basically has a whole lot of information which you need to which needs to be given in the notice that is to be given to the data principal when you're collecting the data. So the notice is an important compliance. Then is you have to ensure that the personal data collected is complete, it's accurate, it's not misleading, and it is updated, right? Then you also need to put in processes to automatically delete the personal data at the end of processing. So the law requires that you cannot retain the data than for longer than the purpose than after the purpose for which it was collected is completed. So if you have collected the data for a particular purpose and that is fulfilled, then you do not need to then you cannot retain the data. You have to delete that data. So you have to put in processes to make sure that to take continuous review, that is the next point, and to undertake periodic reviews to determine whether it is necessary to retain the personal data which is in the possession. So you need to dedicate a resource to take periodic reviews of the data which is not necessary, and delete that data from a system. Next is designation of a data protection officer. Of course, for significant data fiduciaries, this is a mandatory requirement, but for other data fiduciaries, it is also a requirement which will help the, uh, uh, the smooth functioning of the company, because this officer will be the one point contact for the company and for the data principal to contact in case of any queries, applications, concerns, etc. So data protection officer is an absolute must, which is something that I believe at least no business which is a significant data fiduciary can go ahead with its business without appointing a data protection officer. Next is, so this is a very important compliance, which is privacy by design policy. Now, again, this must be certified by the Data Protection Authority. So, a privacy by design policy is basically a policy which contains all the information about how you are securing the data, as in your encryption uh, modes, etc. How you're going to put in all those the technology that you're using to process the data, how harmful it is, what will happen if there's a data breach, and etc etc. So there are a lot of things which a privacy by design policy should have, and that should be certified by the Data Protection Authority, which is constituted under the act. So that is a very important compliance which has to be done. Another thing is maintaining transparency. So generally the bill, if you have maintained complete transparency with your data principal, it is very less likely that you will face any significant legal problems with respect to the data security bill. So this is something that I advise a lot of my clients also, and I tell them that that transparency is something that will actually keep you safe and your business safe from any sort of investigation or inquiries. So as far as possible, whatever policies are designed, you must maintain transparency in all forms. Third is implement safety security safeguards, use of de-identification and decryption. This we encryption. This we have discussed. Steps to protect integrity of personal data, prevent misuse, unauthorized access, modification, disclosure of destruction of data. Right. So if there is another requirement under the bill is that if there is any data breach that happens, then that must be immediately notified to the authority, the data protection authority. So the company must also, I think ideally this is going to be the obligation of the data protection officer. But and that is why I say the data protection officer is very important, because these are small compliances which the company has to do under this bill. So, designating a data protection officer is something that is absolutely essential. Next is you're setting up a mechanism to notify the authority. Yeah, so again, like I said, the any data breach, any significant security concern which the company detects, so that has to be immediately notified. Because if you hide this from the authority, or if you make the mistake of not disclosing anything, then it will lead to greater trouble. So it's always you are required and you're mandated under the act to notify the authority. So you should do it in order to avoid any prolonged penalties. And the penalties under this bill are severe. So I'm not gone into the details, because then it would take a that would lead to almost a 2-3 hour long session. But um, but the I mean as an overview, I mean, I don't know if for people who don't know, the penalties have also gone up till I mean, under the bill they go up till 4% of the worldwide annual turnover of the company, and in some cases 2%. And then there are others where the penalties are up to a maximum of 10 lakhs and 50 lakhs. So the penalties are humongous. So it obviously depends on the different on what is the offense, or what is the violation that you have committed. But basically speaking, the penalties are huge under the bill. So after that, the grievance redressal mechanism is something that is definitely that is also a must. Just like the data protection officer, you have to also appoint the grievance redressal officer, who is going to be in charge of any grievance which might come up with the data principles. Now, these are some additional compliances for significant data fiduciaries. Significant data fiduciaries are required to also do all these things in addition to what I mentioned, the further data fiduciaries. So, first is like the significant data fiduciaries are mandatorily required to register with the Data Protection Authority. They are also required to undertake a data protection impact assessment, which is basically an assessment which reveals that what is the harm that is likely to be caused by your processing of the data. So if you are processing data and it is likely to cause some severe harm in case the data is breached, then that will that will all be revealed under the data protection impact assessment. Uh, then comes maintenance of records. Now again, this I think this is under section 28, if I'm not mistaken, but I will have to check the section again. But that also mentions the number of records and everything that the significant data fiduciaries are required to maintain. And all this is really reviewed by the authority. So the authority, because you register with the DPA, the DPA will have a constant, it will be like a watchdog over you if you're a significant data fiduciary. So you need to be very well compliant with all these records. Next is you have to undertake annual audits by an independent data auditor. You also have to go for you also have to mandatorily appoint a data protection officer, and he should be based in India. He cannot be based outside of India. Non-compliance can attract serious penalties, which goes up to 5 crores or 2% of the annual turnover. So so these compliances are quite important, or else it can lead to severe costs to be paid. Now, these are some steps that the company can take to minimize the cost, or these are the steps, rather than minimizing cost. I think these are steps that the companies can take to avoid being a significant data fiduciary. So actually, the significant data fiduciaries, will be notified by the government. So that will depend on a number of factors. One of them will be, of course, the volume of the data. How much volume is the data fiduciary processing? What are the security measures? How likely is it to cause a major harm to the data principal in case of the breach of or violation of security? So all these things are factors which are taken into account by the DPA, or sorry, these will be taken into account by the government when it notifies the significant data fiduciaries, as in who will be these people. So these are some of the steps that the companies can take to avoid coming into the threshold of a significant data fiduciary. Also, it will also depend on the annual turnover of the company. So of course, I think it will be, there'll be a particular threshold number, so above that, the companies having turnover above that threshold number will actually fall into the category of significant data fiduciaries. So once, I mean, if your annual turnover is that much, and you possibly can't do much, but these are some of the basic steps which you can take, which will help you in, as far as possible, help you in sort of immunizing yourself from the applicability of the bill. So first thing is data anonymization, like I discussed. This is something that, of course, you will also have to, understand from a technology expert, or a data science expert, who will be able to, explain how data anonymization is done, and also that data anonymization actually is also a very, I mean, in terms of people who are interested in new innovative ideas, but this is a space which is going to catch fire after, I believe, after this act comes out, because everybody would want to anonymize, find out techniques to anonymize their data, so to not comply or not fall under the applicability of this bill, to sort of insulate them from the bill. So this so data anonymization, even as a business perspective, for a business person, it's a very interesting area, because the more innovation comes into this area, the more in demand it will be. So just going off the topic for a minute. So data anonymization, there are techniques such as masking, data swapping, pseudomization, synthetic data generalization, etc. Now these are very technical terms, and frankly, even I have no idea of how these exactly work, but these are some very commonly used practices in the EU and in the US, etc. For these for anonymization. Next is investing in a database firewall, data masking and encryption technique to prevent data loss, monitoring the database activity, discovery and classification of data, access behavior, and alert any abnormal or potential risk, etc. All these things are going to ensure that there is not much harm that is caused, or there it minimizes the risk of any data breach, or any harm caused by the data breach or something like that, right? So these are also some of the things that the company can employ. What else can you do? You can, as far as possible, in my opinion, avoid sharing data with third parties even with consent, because um, I mean, of course, sometimes the nature of the business is such that you cannot avoid sharing the data with third parties. But and the most common thing nowadays is in the standard form, and when the consent is taken, you also take consent to share the data with the third party. But in my opinion, that will, as far as possible, and as far as so far as your business model permits you, you must avoid sharing data with any third party. uh, Next is adequate training facilities for data protection officers. That is something that, of course, I mean, that's a business call. Revise and update contracts with data processors and data processing agencies to cover adequate legal checks. Yeah, so this is also very important, that when you enter into contracts with data processors to process the data, where you're outsourcing the data processing, then you need to have these contracts very well checked, and to to avoid any liability issues or accountability issues. So that is also something that is important. For data processors, there are lesser requirements, but nonetheless, they are also required to process data in a fair and reasonable manner. They, of course, have to ensure privacy. They have to process the data within the construct of the purpose for which it is being processed, which is very important. Um, they have to implement safety safeguards, same as data fiduciaries. Any periodical review, they have to undertake periodical review of the safety safeguards. Like, you have to keep reviewing your safety safeguards, keep updating them. Contract with data fiduciary, again, the contract should be very well, should be sound. It should contain all the things which are necessary for this, for compliance with the bill. So this brings us to the end of our session. Of course, I assume there are going to be some questions, but since we have limited time, I think I can surely, and just in case there's anything that, of course, that I can help you with, please feel free to contact me on my details which are mentioned on the screen. You can drop an email to me. I respond to emails faster than I respond to messages or WhatsApp. So thank you all very much for being so patient and listening to me. And I'll now, pass it over to Rishwin for the questions.
Right. Thank you so very much, ma'am, for this amazing, amazing session. And this has been extremely educative and helpful for all of us. Again, like you said, in the interest of time, we would ideally like to take all questions up and answer them in as much details as possible. But okay, we'll have to obviously restrict the questions. Let's start with this one asked by Shubham. I think you've answered this question, but if you want, you can take it up. You can take it up again. So Shubham asks, what are the penal consequences of not complying with the existing provisions or the upcoming provisions of the bill?
I'm sorry, I didn't get your question. Can you just, my voice is breaking. There might be some bandwidth issue.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yeah, yeah, it's better. It's better.
Just a second. So Shubham is asking, what are the penal consequences of not complying with the existing provisions or the upcoming provisions from the bill? I think you've already answered
Yeah,
this, but if you want, you can probably
yeah,
say a couple of words.
like I said, there are, the different, depends on the different sections and the different, so depends on what breaches you have made. So the penalties are different. So in some cases, the penalty is up to 2% of the annual turnover. In some cases, the penalty is up to 4% of the worldwide annual turnover. In some cases, penalties is up to 50 lakhs. In some cases, the upper limit is up to 10 lakhs. So the penalty provisions are actually, a little segregated in terms of what breaches of the bill is contemplated. But then, like, yeah, in the interest of time, I would just suggest, this is something that will need a lot of time. If we can possibly do another session on penalties, if you wish to. But this is the basically the answer.
Sounds good. Anusha asks, are there any restrictions on processing of individual data and individual person's data? Any kind of restrictions?
Any restrictions as an individual? So the data which is processed by basically personal data is the data of individuals. So individuals,
No,
I
I
mean
think
I,
no. So I think what Anusha is trying to ask is, does the
hmm.
bill prescribe any prohibitions that you can, although you can collect this kind of data, but you can't use it to process and figure out ABC kind of say details
Unfortunately,
or anything like that.
yeah, unfortunately, no, because collection under the bill is also processing. So there is no distinction as such which is made between just collecting the data and not using it, or just collecting it and storing it, but because that will also fall under processing, in my understanding. So I don't think so, because if you're collecting data, so irrespective of whether you're processing it or not, I mean, if like what if you fall under the applicability of the bill, like how we discussed, then
Mhm.
there is no specific prohibition in that regard.
Sahil has two very interesting questions. He
Yes.
asks, how important will the GDPR agreement be to launch international servers? And the second one is, are we able to measure and demonstrate the compliance with respect to global data privacy regulations vis-a-vis the PDP?
Okay, so for no, so I couldn't get your second question completely. I'll just answer the first one. The GDPR is, I would say, it is at the moment, and to my understanding, international servers is not something that is contemplated under the GDPR as of now. It's quite silent on it. So, good question, but I don't believe I can give you much input on that. But that is definitely an interesting point of research. It can definitely, lead to some research on this. And the second question was, what did you say?
The second question was, are we able to measure and demonstrate the compliances of the PDP vis-a-vis the GDPR?
Yeah,
Basically, I think he's
so
trying to understand how GDPR fares, how the PDP fares vis-a-vis the GDPR.
Yeah, so interesting question. I think the GDPR is largely, if you want to comparatively see, then the GDPR and the PDP are more or less. So if you're compliant under the GDPR, you are also largely compliant under the PDP bill. So there's not much of a not a major difference there. But having said that, the PDP bill is as per what the news reports are, the PDP bill is not likely to be enacted in the current form, and it is likely to have a much wider scope in terms of the applicability of. In terms of in terms of the data that is covered by PDP bill. So most likely, any and every form of data is likely to be covered by the PDP bill when it is enacted, because the JPC is definitely going to amend the bill. So I don't so I believe, and I mean, I may be wrong, but just to answer your question, I think the PDP bill is going to attract many more compliances as compared to GDPR.
Right. Thank you so much for that. Thanks for the questions, Sahil. We have final two questions being asked from Mithila. The first one is, what is the nature of government accountability under the PDP?
Yeah, so the government, like we discussed, the government is going to be the bill is going to be applicable to the government. But then, the problem with that is that government has given itself a lot of freebies. So it has made certain loopholes in, I mean, I would like to call them loopholes, where the government can wriggle out of the applicability under the garb of being, processing data which is necessary for the sovereignty or the security of the state. And that could, give them certain immunities which the government can easily utilize. So, although the act largely does apply to the government, and the government is going to be, if the government is collecting data, it is processing data, it is it is going to have to be accountable to the data principles. But since we have that clause of exempting, the government can exempt consent, etc., where it is required for the protection of the security of the state, the government can easily take that as a, I mean, I would like to believe that the government is likely to take that, to play that card, and might as well get out of that accountability. But largely speaking, if the government is processing data, is using it, then it is as accountable as any other data fiduciary.
Right. Okay. And the final question that we have from Mithila, I think I also have one more question I would like to personally ask you. Mithila asks, is the classification of personal data, sensitive personal data, and critical data okay? Or should it have been low, medium, and high risk data? What is your take on this?
um, yeah, good question. What's the name of this, who's asked this question?
Mithila.
Mithila.
Mithila Lokhande.
Okay. Yeah, good question. Actually, low risk and high risk, definitely. But
Hello.
is, I'm sorry,
Ma'am,
is okay.
your voice
Sorry.
got chopped up. Could you please
Is
repeat
it,
the answer? It's better now.
hello? Is it better now? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Can you? Yeah, I would like to believe, I think that personal data and sensitive personal data is okay, because it's also, because if you would classify it as low risk and high risk, then the yardstick on which you would decide risk would essentially be different for different industries. So you can't really define what risk. Now something could be a low risk data for a particular industry, when it might not be that risky for another. So basic, to bring more uniformity, I think it is a fairly decent approach to, classify data as personal data, sensitive personal, and that is, I think, also largely how it's been done in the GDPR. So so I think I don't see any major problem with it. But yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying and where you're coming from, and I think it's a suggestion which could be thought about, and definitely could be researched further. So, in fact, I would like to know from Mithila what her ideas are on this low risk and high risk classification. If you can unmute her, I mean, I would like to hear from her if possible.
Ma'am, we just have one more question to go, and after that, we'll have to end the session. We're
Okay,
already
not a
running out of
problem.
time.
So,
I'll
yeah.
have Mithila, you have ma'am's email ID in front of your screen. Please drop ma'am an email, and you can continue the conversation there. The very last thing is, can you speak a little bit about privacy impact assessment? Is that something being contemplated under the PDP bill? If yes, then what is the GAB and what is the ambit?
Data protection impact assessment is something that, I mean, that is a mandatory requirement for significant data fiduciaries.
Okay.
But that has but that is, like I said, I think I spoke very briefly about it. uh, but that is, I mean, is that what you want to know about, or is it privacy is something different that you're contemplating? I mean, in the
No, I
question.
think that, no, the question itself says privacy impact assessment. I think the concept would be the same. One would probably be under
Yeah,
GDPR, and this is under the PDP. I think the
yeah.
focal point is this still the same.
Yeah. So the data protection impact assessment, like I said, is a mandatory requirement for significant data fiduciaries, and that is something which has to be undertaken in order to reveal that what exactly what are the risks associated with the processing of the data, like what is the likely what are the measures that the company has put in to protect the data, what are the measures that they are doing to secure the data. If there is a data breach, how will that impact the data principal, what harm is it likely to cause to the data principal. So all these things are really analyzed in depth for in this impact assessment, and that is it gives a holistic view as to where the company stands in its data protection compliances. So that is and that is absolutely mandatory, and for significant data fiduciaries, so not for data fiduciaries. So that is I guess that's what you want to know, and I hope that answers your question.
Right. So I think with that, we're going to be ending the session with a spillover of over half an hour. This is the mark. And we have so many questions in my inbox right now, which have not been answered. This is the mark of a very, very successful event. Thank you so much once again, Sugita ma'am, for taking the time out to join us with this session today and to share the
Thank you.
invaluable information that you've shared with all of us.
Thank you. And
Uh,
regarding those goodie bags,
yes.
I will speak. I will inform Rishwin about it after this session, and he will get in touch with you, and we can coordinate on the address and everything.
Absolutely. We'll be very happy to coordinate
Yeah,
all
yeah,
of
and
that.
thank you for the questions. There are some really interesting questions. I'm really glad that that you have. Everybody has listened to the session so well, and they've understood, and I'm surely going to tell Rishwin who the winners are. So yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. We all look forward to that. And to all the participants and the attendees for today's session, again, thank you so much for being so patient. And again, being with us for an hour and a half, again, on a long weekend. This again signifies the fact that this is a very hot topic. This is something that a lot of people are interested in. And the fact that Sugita ma'am was a wonderful, wonderful host for today's session. Thank you so much, Lloyd, as well, for organizing all of this session and for making all of this possible. The video for this session will be put up on our YouTube channel in another couple of days. So please feel free to go to the YouTube channel, watch the video again in case you missed out on something, or if some part of it was not very clear to you in the first go. Again, ma'am's contact details are in front of your screen. Please feel free to reach out to ma'am for any further questions that you may have. Thanks a lot. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening, all of you.
Thank you.